Kia ora, haere mai, and welcome to today's Nichecast episode. We've got plenty of interesting Kiwi sports things happening at the moment, or going to happen this weekend, or just floating around the universe as we tend to do on our Kiwi sporting excellence rocket ship. That's what we're up to. It's just floating around the universe on a rocket ship that's floating with no need for the rocket boosters. It's just a rocket ship that's cruising, floating, because that's what us Kiwis do. Every week, early in the week, we record our Patreon podcast, and that is there for the patrons who support the Nichecast. And the best way to support the Nichecast is via Patreon. So head on over to patreon.com/Nichecast, EL Nichecast, and just join up, support the boys, what we're doing. And you'll get extra podcasts every week, as well as just good vibes flowing between the two of us as we all float around the universe. Every Monday and Friday, we deliver an email banger as well via Substack. Sign up the nichecast.substack.com. And like most weeks, you'll find some more Charlie's Ledger Walker nuggets from the wild card. You'll find random tidbits about any old basketball player from New Zealand in the Australian League, some Flying Kiwis nuggets there as well. Plenty of pop culture and music nuggets from the wild card as well. And then the big thing I'm unleashing for the email this week is on Monday, I talked about the Ardie Savea contract situation, him negotiating his own contract with NZRU, some Brandon Smith stuff in there as well, just with rugby and rugby league, two players executing their power with contract stuff happening at the same time, like maybe 2 weeks apart. So I found that really interesting, and I wrote about it on Monday, and I'm going to write about tomorrow because Ardie Savea has just joined Rock Nation, which seems like a natural escalation of my intrigue on Monday. And that's where you get on the email. So sign up. The link will be somewhere in this universe floating with us. And of course, we're always writing about Kiwi sports at the niche-cage.com. We've got recent Blackcaps yarns. We've got all the Super Smash yarns are there. The Flying Kiwis column every week is there. The big old Stephen Adams yarn is there. And much of the stuff we're discussing in today's podcast, you'll find something written about it at the niche-cage.com. So big it up yourself for supporting the Nichecast. And let's just, why not, big it up to ourselves for just being here for Aotearoa sport. And we start our show with some mindfulness. So Wildcard, can you please set the tone with your dose of mindfulness?
Yeah, how's this one for you? From the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who's the fellow that the Beatles went and hung out with in the 60s, along with a lot of other musicians and actors and famous people from the time, from the Western world, dipping into some Eastern ideas. I don't know, philosophy, I suppose. His quote is, "Happiness radiates like the fragrance from a flower and draws all good things towards you."
That's been your theme of the week. I'm talking about the email, me doing the Ardie Savea kind of Brandon Smith contract, player power and player empowerment. That's my theme of the week. Your theme of the week is fucking flowers and breeze and scents and fragrance. It's good. Lots of variety. That's what we're here for. So you're basically saying, like, much like because you hear about positive energy and all that called as light. So what does light does? What does light do? It just it's a thing that shines and spreads light outwards. Same with the scent of a flower in full blossom, which is what we have right now. It's springtime coming into more summerish, and everything's
it's summer now. Yeah,
lots of fragrance of all varieties in the nature.
Yeah, like light illuminates dark places, doesn't it? Is what light does. And this idea of happiness being like a flower's fragrance, drawing good things towards you. I guess it's just a matter of if you keep a happy disposition, good things happen. If one thing leads to another. It's a snowballing effect. It's like you keep things nice and positive, and then further positive things happen. We're in a way where it's that thing about your disposition sort of determines what happens to you. Whereas if you, by that same logic, if you keep the opposite of happiness going on, then negative things will happen, and you will see those negative things more often. You'll perceive them. You'll then sort of, in effect, magnetize them to you in the same way that happiness has the opposite, happier effect. It's I don't know, simple logic, as most of these mindfulness ideas are, but golden logic.
Shout out to gold as well, ancient currency, and something that ancient currency,
not even ancient, it's still
exactly,
the basis,
and it's one of the few things that has just stood the test of time. So yeah, whatever, gold, cool. We are coming off a Blackcaps series defeat against India wildcard, and I was curious just how you've reflected on the series from a very broad perspective, because we did do a deep dive to some extent on the Patreon podcast. So shout out to the Patreon podcast. Go check that out. And that's another reason to join the Patreon fund. We went deep into Blackcaps business from that test series. But here on, Thursday, that series was all wrapped up earlier in the week. So we're a few days removed. How are you just feeling bigger picture heading into a home summer and the narrower thing? I'm kind of excited about this little upcoming stint of domestic cricket. It's a bit confusing because you've got Super Smash games on the weekend, then you'll have a Ford Trophy game on the Monday and Tuesday, or you'll have Super Smash games on one day, like tomorrow, Friday, and then Halliburton Johnston Shield games on the Saturday. So it's a bit of a confusing time for me, just trying to figure out how do I cover two different competitions that are happening at the same time, but it's a good challenge nonetheless. But I think as December rolls on, it's going to get very Super Smash centric, say that a billion times. And I'm excited about that because it just, all the domestic players are on TV, and you can see them in a format which I think is a good, T20 cricket for me domestically is great. I just love it. Men and women, it's just a good opportunity for those players because the good players are going to be good no matter what, right? You don't get the variance between T20 international or test player, and it's just good to have all the domestic players on show. That's kind of my intrigue straight away, moving off that Blackcaps test. And then there will be Blackcaps test cricket coming up deeper into early next year, I think. January, early New Year's test.
Right at the start of January, yeah.
Yeah. So just bigger picture, how are you feeling about the Blackcaps just a few days removed from their test series defeat against India? And what about the next kind of cycle excites you when you're thinking about Kiwi cricket?
Yeah, I expected them to struggle in India. I think at the end of a long tour for a lot of those players as well. And also the guys who weren't at the end of the long tour were coming in really undercooked, just having not played a lot of cricket. And it's India. It's the toughest place in the world to go play. And notoriously, we tend to struggle there as soon as we come up against a spinning wicket. You either get the spinning wickets or the flat wickets. The flat wickets we can get draws in. The spinning wickets we tend to lose by a lot. And that's how it went. We got a relatively flat wicket, bit of uneven bounce in the first one, but otherwise relatively flat. And we did well to get to draw. It was really solid, commendable result that's going to reflect very nicely come the end of the Test Championship cycle that we actually got something from there, because I don't think too many other teams will get much out of traveling to India. The second test, very unsurprisingly, after a draw in the first one, spun a mile the next time. What do you know? And that just exposed the natural weaknesses that the Blackcaps are always going to have. And you take Kane Williamson out of the team, and you get second spinner not doing anything, not taking a wicket all series. First spinner taking 10 wickets in the first one. It's kind of just the way it goes. You get skittled for 62, you're going to lose pretty much every game from that point on. So the batting lineup failed. The bowlers failed to take wickets other than no Blackcaps pace bowler took a wicket in that second test. I mean, even in spinning conditions, that's just a recipe for disaster for New Zealand, because no matter where you play, you're still going to have to keep the core of your identity as a cricket team intact. And for the Blackcaps, that is seam bowlers being able to, do damage with a new ball, and didn't get that. So, I mean, disappointing in that they got thrashed. That's never fun, but also it's just one of those, the recipe was there. it's not a result that reflects badly on the Blackcaps. It doesn't. I mean, other than that individual performance, like the general trajectory doesn't change because of that loss. So in light of that, I'm quite excited for a couple tests against Bangladesh. You know, as excited as you can be for a couple home tests against a team that's never won a game in any format in this country. Just because I think there's dudes like Ross Taylor's copping a lot of criticism right now, which is a little bit unfair considering he's hardly the only one who failed during that series. And he'll definitely get another go. So I'm sure of it. As long as he wants it. Like, there's very few players who get into the position where they should be undroppable. Barring certain, like, obviously if you get score 10 ducks in a row, no one's safe. But as long as you're chipping away throughout, like, very few players get into this position. But Ross Taylor is in that position where, like, Ross Taylor doesn't leave the Blackcaps test team until he decides to leave the Blackcaps test team. Like, they can drop him from the 2020s, whatever, but you owe him that much. Like, Kane Williamson's elbow means he's not going to play this series almost certainly. So that means you can bring in Devon Conway without having to drop Will Young or Ross Taylor or whatever. It all good. Like, which means that guys like Ross Taylor, I think Henry Nichols is probably another one in a similar boat, are going to get an opportunity to probably score a lot of runs against a traveling Bangladeshi team that doesn't have Shakib Al Hassan. Like, that's cool. We get to go back to the Blackcaps pummeling teams in home conditions, most likely. I mean, you never know for certain, but I'd say as far as it goes, that's probably what we can expect. Bangladesh just got smoked by Pakistan yesterday. That game finished, didn't it, in their most recent match? So, like, yeah, it's a disappointing way to end the tour in India, but, like, doesn't change anything in the overalls about the Blackcaps. And I think we're going to see that the same swing seat that we used to get at the start of this Blackcaps journey, when they were beginning to become a very good test team, where, like, they would go overseas in the winter and lose, and then they'd come back and people would say, well, they're under pressure. They're not, this guy's not performing, this guy's not performing. Then they'd get a home series, normally against a home summer, normally against a couple of subcontinent teams, absolutely smoke them. And then everyone will go in the other direction and be like, oh, they're the greatest team in the world, no one can touch us, sort of thing. I think we're in for another nice swing back up in that way when the home summer comes around.
That, we both have vivid memories of that kind of period. And
because we've been riding through it,
and I hadn't really thought about it too much until you just mentioned it, and it's kind of exactly what's happening. One thing about Ross Taylor, if there's one person I don't really trust a whole lot to do the best thing for Ross Taylor, it's the coach and the selector Gavin Larson. So that is just one thing that, like, you were talking to. Yeah, great. Like, he's a legend. Like, he should be always selected and given the benefit of the doubt. But I don't trust anyone there to make that decision, other than, like, the boys, Kane Williamson, Southey, Bolt, and those people. What the big Blackcaps thing for me was, like, how I counted 19 players played between the England Test Series and the Indian Test Series, and Glenn Phillips was there in the squad. He didn't play, so, like, 19 players were actually used, and I think Glenn Phillips is right there on the test fringes just with what he's done and who he has been. Like, I don't think he was selected for that test series because he has bowled a couple of overs of spin this year, right? Like, I think he's genuinely there in the mix.
So he played that test against Australia, scored a 50 on debut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you do, I think you have at least, but a pretty decent good group of 20 players. And if we have 20 quality or international caliber quality players, which I think we're seeing Daryl Mitchell, Young, Conway, those type of characters, they have done shit in international cricket already. So we've got 20 odd players, and that's just a cool place to be. And I think, that's what we've seen from test series to test series. And that first test series involved England. And I would also throw up England as a comparison marker for the Blackcaps over from July to July, right? Like, so we toured England over July and we defeated them. Obviously, we've got front and center views of England in our tallies this summer because they're in the Ashes, and hopefully they get rolled by Australia, because that would make me really, really happy. And
They're going
then
to.
we
They're
go
definitely
back,
going to get rolled.
and then we go back to England next year for 3 tests. So we might just like destroy them there as well. So regardless of what the Blackcaps do against England, like we can just we've got 3 checkpoints. We've got last test series in England, Ashes, and we've got next test series in England for the Blackcaps to compare against England. And I think it just makes it clear cut, and it's a good way just to view the Blackcaps in their trending direction. Do you have anything on that England comparison before we move on?
I mean, only just that I do enjoy when we play against England. Like there's been that a lot of the English sort of revival over the last few years has been about them it started with the ODI stuff when they came here and we skittled them for like 50 at the World Cup, and then Owen Morgan basically just decided to let's take everything that Brendan McCullum's done and use it for us, but they added like quite a heavy analytical aspect to it as well. And I think there's aspects of that where they might have reached the tipping point and gone past that. At the moment, I was just looking at not playing Broad or Anderson in the first test of the Ashes, I think is a big risk. And then getting pulled up for less than 150 on top of that. So your batters didn't deliver either. I think I don't fully trust. England's got a fantastic team, but I don't fully trust them. But every time we seem to play against them lately, it's a classic. Like we had a really good, enjoyable test series against them recently, a fantastic game of the 2020 World Cup that goes back to the ODI World Cup final and all of them shenanigans. So, and then they've toured here as well in between then, haven't they? And there was a couple really nice test matches in there. I think one of them was when Daryl Mitchell made his test debut, in fact, and I think a 2020 series with a couple of super overs, which I think England might have actually won that 1-3-2 in the end, that when they were last here. So every time we play against England, it's fun. And I think this is good for the Blackcaps brand. There's been a lot of cozying up to India for the like sort of sponsorship money in recent times, which are understandable. You do what you got to do. But there's also been this like sort of cricketing cozy up with England. And it's funny because I think the teams get on really well. They've got like a similar thing going on because of all that, what I just said. But also because of that similar thing, they match up in a really interesting way. And we have, I wouldn't say we've tended to beat them, but we've probably got the better of them a little more often than not, especially we have in test matches anyway, because we played them 4 times in test matches during the last test championship cycle. None of them were test championship games, but I think we won both two game series, 1 home, 1 away. We won each series 1-0. So 2 wins, 2 draws, no losses over that span. So that is, I hadn't been thinking further ahead of the home summer, because I think Bangladesh are coming, and then is it South Africa or something like that? And there's some like limited overs games as well as a series against Australia. So it's like normally we're ripping into the first test. We would be within the second test of the first home summer tour right now, but the off season stuff went very long overseas. So I hadn't thought much further than that, but that does actually flow on really nicely a tour to England after the home stuff, which is probably going to go a little bit later than normal. So that's cool, man. That's after a grueling series in India, I think we've got a lot of good opportunities for the Blackcaps to get back to what we're used to seeing from them now.
Don't know what we are used to seeing with Steven Adams. Like those estuaries are a bit murky. They're in the wash between the ocean and the deeper mangroves. Let's just say that. They lost a few games in a row earlier in the season, but right now, Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies, Steven Adams at least, I assume he's playing all of these games, but so he's got a 5-game win streak. The Memphis Grizzlies have a 5-game win streak. They are 7-3 in their last 10 games. They have moved up to 4th in the Western Conference Division, behind the Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns, the Golden State Warriors, and they're in a pretty good place, if I might say so myself, because I don't really see any good shit happening for the Clippers or the Lakers or the Mavericks wildcard, your team, because I just don't see them doing anything. Denver Nuggets battling injuries, and Memphis Grizzlies are quite clearly, I believe, the fourth best team in the Western Conference. And old Steven Adams is typically part of that. I have one thing that I was literally listening to some NBA podcasts prior to recording. And over the last few days, there were three top tier NBA podcasts, and they all discussed the Memphis Grizzlies in this way, because that's what they do. Teams that are streaking, you dissect what they're doing well. And two of the podcasts, deep dives into the Memphis Grizzlies, did not mention Steven Adams. The one podcast that did was The Mismatch with Kevin O'Connor and Chris Vernon. Chris Vernon is a Memphis. He's like a media dude in Memphis. So he's got it front and center. And they did discuss some of the stuff that Steven Adams is doing. They did reference his guarantee to win the tip-off of a game. And Chris Vernon was saying that someone was talking to him about putting bets on all the Memphis starters to be the first point scorer. Because if Steven Adams is winning every tip, it's a guarantee that you will win one of those bets if you bet the four starters that aren't Steven Adams, because he's going to win the tip, and then it's a guarantee Memphis is going to score the first points of the game. But that's
as long as they make the shot. But yeah,
well, obviously. But you did mention some of the Steven Adams stats and all that. But to me, it just sums up the role Steven Adams has. Like, that's a typical Kiwi sports thing. Like, no one's going to look at like Kiwi athletes and be like, holy shit, that dude's the leading star. No, like Steven Adams is very low key in what he does in helping his team win, and his team is winning right now. Give us maybe like just one kind of thing about Steven Adams playing with the Memphis Grizzlies during this win streak, because I don't know if the guaranteed tip-off win is like impacting Memphis Grizzlies wins. Like, it's a cool thing, but it's not directly impacting wins. And then maybe just a couple minutes on Memphis Grizzlies standing in the Western Conference, because I'm like, it's basically locked in that for not the first time in a while, but Steven Adams is going to play playoff basketball with a good young upstart team this season, and that is very exciting, and I am looking forward to it. It's going to be lovely.
Yeah, well, don't think I'm going to lock that one in quite yet. Definitely good vibes in that direction. I mean, you mentioned a couple of those other teams have been struggling with injuries, and Dallas Mavericks are part of that. Luka Doncic hasn't played for a little bit. He's on his way back.
They're not making the playoffs. Like, don't worry about any of those teams. It's not happening. It's
Dallas
the year
is making
of Steven
the playoffs.
Adams.
They're just not going to win a series.
It's all Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies. That's the destiny that we're working with now. Blackcaps' destiny wasn't like, I had to work hard to put a positive twist on it and really play up some ideas that are important. But the destiny part of it didn't pan out as well as I had hoped. And I'm parlaying that into Steven Adams' Memphis Grizzlies' destiny right now.
Yeah, well, because a lot of these, the Clippers are another one. Kawhi Leonard's, don't know if he's even played this season. I can't remember. I haven't paid much attention to the Clippers recently. Like, there are these other teams. LeBron James for the Lakers was in COVID protocols for a little bit. Like, every team seems to have had, like, these other teams that are having little stumbles have lost a key player along the way. That's kind of been the reason for that. Reason I say this, though, is because so has Memphis. Ja Morant did a hammy or something like that a week or two ago. He hasn't played for the last 5 games. Well, what have they done in the last 5 games? There's your 5-game win streak right there. Like, their best player gets injured, and everyone just rallies around without him, and they play a whole lot better. There's a couple angles to think about it like that, because one, let's be honest, Ja Morant is their best player, and they're a better team when he plays. That's like clear and obvious. Having said that, they've been super good defensively in this 5-game stretch, and Ja Morant potentially has a little bit of the Russell Westbrooks about him on defense, where, he can be a good defender locked in, but maybe he gambles a little bit too much. Maybe he, expends a lot of energy going forward and doesn't necessarily get back quite as quick as he could in transition, which is like a lot. It sounds like a simple thing, like get back on defense. Sounds like an easy thing to just attack a player with. But if you are actually like hurtling round screens and towards the rim every time, and then getting smashed as you go up, and then maybe you miss a shot, maybe you get a shot, you don't get a call from the ref, whatever. Like, it's actually a lot harder to get back in transition than it sounds like, because you're getting smashed. You've got further to run, for one thing. If you're attacking the rim, the direct other end of the court. Like, those things do tally up. So I got like sympathies for star players who get told things like that as if they're just like prima donnas who don't care. It's not just that; it's harder for them to do this than it is for other people. But maybe Ja Morant's defense not being a part of this 5-game span has been a factor. I think that doesn't mean that they're like. I mean, as much as anything, it's also as well like you've got his scoring is disappearing, but other players have rallied around to like pick up that slack. Other guy, Desmond Bain's been shooting the lights out at the moment. Steven Adams has actually had a boost in points recently. Right after I wrote about him, not like his points don't matter. I wrote, it was like the main theme of the third Kiwi Steve piece was like, don't even worry about his points. Like, if he has 17, that's great. If he has 2, that's fine as well. Just focus on what else he does. Like, is he rebounding? Is he dishing a couple of assists? If that's the case, he's having a good game regardless of the points. But the points look nice. Like, if you are getting a couple, consecutive double doubles, like something like 16 and 17, and they went over Memphis or something, went over Miami, something crazy like that. So if you do that every now and then, it gets people off your back at least. So that's cool. It's. Yeah, when a star player is missing, it gives everybody else a bit of a wake-up call, and they know that they can't just rely on that person. They have to do a little bit more. When a star player is out and the team is winning without them, then maybe that's a little bit of a wake-up call for them as well, and a couple of things. But what are they doing well that I'm not doing? So I don't think this is a thing of like they're going to, they're going to revert to what they were when Ja Morant comes back. I think it's actually like great timing for them to be like, well, Ja Morant can come back in and know he doesn't have to do absolutely everything because these other guys have done good, so they've picked up a bit of confidence and whatever. And also Ja Morant can maybe see just having that time, because NBA is crazy. You're playing like every second or third day, basically, for the whole thing. You barely get a day off to train. It can be pretty hard to pick up those like learnings on the fly. You got a lot of like coaching staff trying to get through to players and video sessions and whatever, but it's also crammed in. Like, I can see how these things would slip through the cracks. Having that actually like 2 weeks off to just watch and study and learn, I think also helps Ja Morant in that sort of way. So it's been an amazing spell from the Grizzlies, and I think it does really set them up beautifully for when Morant does come back to like take the best things that they did in this spell, take the best things that Ja Morant has to offer, put it all together, and then try lock down maybe even a top 4 seed. They're not going to keep winning the way they have been. I mean, it's crazy. They lost their best player and they have not trailed in those 5. They've not just won 5 games in a row. They have not trailed in any of those 5 games. It's nuts. If these games were coming down to the last shot of the game, then maybe you could make a point that Steven Adams' tip-offs, getting that extra possession, makes a big difference, but not when they're blowing teams out. Certainly not then. However, I do think, to answer your bit on the one thing about Steven Adams, I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but like I spoke about on the variety show the other day, I spoke about how he had 8 offensive rebounds against Dallas, and he was the only player who's had 8 offensive boards in a game on 3 separate occasions so far this season. I think he had another 7 against Miami the next day. Like, he is, in terms of offensive rebounding percentage, the number 1 offensive rebounder in the NBA. I think he's second overall in terms of boards per game behind Clint Capella, but Clint Capella is getting more minutes per game. So if you take it more as a ratio, then Adams is winning more of them. His offensive boards are massive because like the tip-off gets you that first possession of the game. cool. Like you get to get off to a nice start. It's a lovely way to begin things. But every offensive rebound he gets throughout the game, which is a very similar skill set, getting up and grabbing the ball, that also gets you an extra offensive possession throughout the game. So it's not just like that one at the start. If he's also adding 7 more throughout the game, that's 8 extra possessions. And, one of the things he's very good at is rebounding his own misses. So if he misses up close, grab it back, throw it back in the second time around, sweet as. Same amount of points as you would have got. You cancel out the miss, add an extra rebound to your stats. He's also a good passer out of those areas, so he can grab the ball, chuck it out to an open 3-point shooter or something like that. As everybody's condensing in, looking for the rebound, someone else is hanging out on the edge wide open. Those kind of things, like his offensive rebounding is definitely a major factor of what, that's probably the number one thing people would talk about if you're like, what's Steven Adams' offer to a team? What's his best attribute for a winning basketball team? It probably is that offensive rebounding. Well, this is what that looks like. This is how that's supposed to go.
Good old Kiwi Steve, just doing the mahi. It's like a pure definition of mahi in our Aotearoa context is what Steven Adams does in the NBA. Another Kiwi UFC fight this weekend, wildcard. Kai Kara France fights Cody Garbrandt. Last week we had Brad Riddell losing to Rafael Fiziev, and that was a bummer, won't lie. But we got another big Kiwi UFC fight, and I'll say the interesting way to highlight that is Kai Kara France is fighting on a pay-per-view, and he is the 4th to last fight. So there's 11 fights before Kai Kara France's fight. And that shows kind of his standing. He's in the flyweight division. And that is also interesting because Cody Garbrandt is dropping down from the bantamweight division. So Kai Kara France he's 2-2 in his last 4 fights. He's got a loss, a win, a loss, a win. But Cody Garbrandt is dropping down a division, maybe, because he's had 4 losses in his last fight. So basically, Cody Garbrandt was a champion in the bantamweight division, but then he lost back-to-back fights versus TJ Dillashaw and has now gone on to lose 2 more fights since then. And he's trying to drop down the weight divisions to bully the smaller fighters, essentially. That's kind of what Kai Kara France said in his interview with Ariel Helwani. And then Kai Kara France isn't having a bar of it. So Kai Kara France is coming off a knockout win in his last fight against Rogerio Bontorin. But he does have 2 losses in his entry into the upper echelons of the flyweight division. He's had 2 losses and 2 wins. So it's hard to really say if he's a serious contender, and that's even more complicated because his first loss in the UFC was against Brandon Moreno, who has since gone on to become champion, and he is, since defeating Kai Kara France, he's had 3 wins and a draw. Kai Kara France's second loss in the UFC was against Brandon Royval, who has lost both of his fights since fighting Kai Kara France. So one dude has gone on to become champion. The other dude has lost both of his fights. That makes it really tricky to see, to kind of build that context around Kai Kara France. But basically, Kai Kara France is a serious, consistent contender in the flyweight division. Cody Garbrandt's dropping down from the bantamweight division to try and, in theory, have an easier run towards a title. And Kai Kara France is typically a fighter who is going to try and kill people, knockout style. Not kill people, just knock them out. That's his whole thing. Nickname Don't Blink. Last fight, heavy hands, quick hands. He's so fast. And he's got that city kickboxing striking style as well. So it's going to be exciting. It is on the pay-per-view main card. So if you're going to tune in to Dustin Poirier versus Oliveira, Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena, they are both title fights. And then there's another fight, Jeff Neal. Tai Tuivasa is fighting on the preliminary card, which should be on regular ESPN. But Kai Kara France is fighting on the main event card, so that will be pay-per-view. But it's almost guaranteed to be an exciting fight when Kai Kara France fights, because he puts himself right in the channel to take a lot of punishment. That's why he can lose fights, but he's all guns blazing with the striking.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know if I've got much to add to that. You've summed it up beautifully there. Is there anything else on the cards before the end of the year, or is this like the last big sort of UFC bouts for a little wee while? Because of course, week after next, in the boxing realm is Joseph Parker versus Derek Chisora #2.
I assume like the UFC just keeps on rolling, but I don't think there'll be any New Zealand involvement until February.
Right.
So this is an interesting run. Like Brad Riddell stepping into a upper echelon of the, I think it's lightweight division, had a loss. So that was a bummer of a start to this back end of 2021. And Kai Kara France, like who knows what's going to happen there. So it would be kind of shit if they both lost heading into 2021, but decent chance for Kai Kara France. And then we do have the big boxing event. So it's kind of like City Kickboxing finishes for the year. Joseph Parker takes over as the like Christmas present for 1 ounce scrap fans in New Zealand.
And David Nyika as well on the
David
undercard.
Nyika. Oh, there you go. So give me a hard and fast vibe check on how you're feeling about Joseph Parker and David Nyika.
I intend to check in a little bit more. I'll try write a preview probably early next week or middle next week, most likely. On like more specific type things. I haven't really put a lot of energy into this one lately, so it's the same. Like nothing's changed from how I felt when the fight was first arranged, which is that I think Joseph Parker is much more in line to make better adjustments from fight 1 to fight 2, and he won the first one in a close but I thought correct call the way that went. So like I would be relatively confident in Parker delivering a more convincing win this time. I think he's like it'll be his second fight with Andy Lee, but the first time with like a full proper full-time camp. It's a little bit restricted last time in terms of just not having enough time to work with his new trainer as he would have liked. But this time he's been around for ages. Basically, he hooked up with the camp pre Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder 3. So he was there. He was there with the lads and in the dressing rooms beforehand, and he's like Tyson Fury this time didn't go crazy partying afterwards. He's straight back into camp to prepare like the rest of the family, which Joseph Parker just apparently is part of the Fury family now. It's how it goes, which is good. It's cool. A couple of years ago that would have been a bit of a messy thing, but Tyson Fury is a much more respectable character these days and a very enjoyable fella. So, and a good motivator, I get the impression as well. So that's cool. And David Nyika, by virtue of Joseph Parker, is also now a part of that wider family. So I don't even sure. They must have announced who he's fighting at this point, but the last time I checked, they hadn't. There were some rumors though. It sounded like he's in for a tougher night than what he had in his first fight as a professional. But I would expect someone of David Nyika's caliber to, you don't chuck him in with a cruiserweight contender in his second fight. I would expect he was going to come in the favorite, and I expect we'll see a convincing, impressive performance from him. Hopefully, you want a tougher fight than last time, because last time he had a bit of a farcical knockout in the first round. He was barely even out there. So at least get a couple rounds of work in this time, something to chuck up on a highlight reel or whatever. But I expect good things from David Nyika. So early on, I don't think we'll see anything but nice, convincing wins to begin with his career. And the limit for being able to compete in amateur events is, I think, 5 pro fights. So this will be a second one. It's possible they could squeeze another one in before the Commonwealth Games, but he's not going to fight 5. He's not going to fight another 3 or 4 or 5 fights before then. So Should keep him eligible for the Com Games next year as well, which is another interesting one because he's, I think he's back-to-back gold medalist at Com Games, and obviously just got a bronze medal at the last Olympics. So it'd be his last hurrah as an amateur in that one as well. It's something else to keep an eye on.
Keeping an eye on another beautiful Friday of Kiwi sports. You got the Super Smash double header on. I think it's free to air on Duke as well as Spark. So that's great. And we got another Wellington Phoenix double header, which is always great. And I've got 3 questions about the Wellington Phoenix wildcard before we dive into the National South Central Series, National League South Central Series. What was the Super Smash one? Tongue twister?
That you said earlier on.
Yeah.
Some Super Smash centric
National League South Central Series.
That's there you go.
Good little combo.
There was a spell last week when there's 2 Super Smash games. Well, they're back to back, but 2 Super Smash games were on, 2 Wellington Phoenix games were on, and I think there would have been the Blackcaps, wouldn't it? Was the other one that was on. And all 3 were in a weather delay at the same time at one point. There was a lightning delay, stopped the Phoenix. There was some rain in the cricket. And then there was, Blackcaps also had, I think, light dramas it was the wet outfield delayed the start was what it was.
Yes,
so
that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very strange, but part of the fun. So Wellington Phoenix questions. They are both playing, the men and women. They are playing Newcastle. And on the men's side of things, Newcastle are 10th, Wellington Phoenix is 7th. Wellington Phoenix have had a triple, a single triple. 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss. And the Newcastle...
for the cycle.
Yeah, the Newcastle Jets, they are 2 draws, 1 loss. So very simply, Wellington Phoenix slightly ahead. And in the women's side, I think Newcastle Jets lost their first game. Wellington Phoenix drew their first game. And my question to you, Wildcard, first question is, will this doubleheader be a winning doubleheader? I look like from a very simple perspective, I see with 2 good Wellington Phoenix teams coming up against 2 slightly worse Newcastle Jets teams. You're the person who actually fucking watches the football, unlike me. So we looking for a winning double header for the Wellington Phoenix?
I'm just looking up the Newcastle Jets women's team. They lost 3-1 to Sydney. There's a Sydney team that didn't have Paige Satchel, who was still none of there's only a couple that were on that tour for the football ferns, but Malia Steinmetz was the same. Would have played against the Phoenix in their first game, but after coming back from South Korea, neither of them were I suppose risked for the first week. Newcastle Jets, I mean, Sydney are very good, so that's not that. Newcastle had a red card towards the end as well. That's not a big blowout one or anything that says anything drastic. But I think the Jets are one of those teams who I was actually looking at the fixture list because there's 14 games in the women's A-League season per team, and there are 10 teams. So obviously you don't get to play everyone twice. So you play 5 teams twice and 4 teams once. The 4 teams that the Phoenix only have to play once are Canberra, who were semi-finalists last season, back when Paige Satchel was playing for them. Melbourne Victory, who are defending champions and just won 6-1 or something like that in their first game. Who was the other one? Brisbane Roar, who were semi-finalists last season. And Melbourne City, who weren't semi-finalists last season, missed the semi-finals, but before that had won 4 of the previous 5 championships. So that's a super generous draw. The one sort of top level team that they will avoid having to play is they don't avoid having to play twice is Sydney FC. They got 2 games against them, so that'll be tricky. But other than that, it's quite nice. If they're going to have some winnable games along the way, especially if they can play the way they did in that first game and repeat the dose. I'm talking about the women's team a lot more here because I think that's a closer one. It's probably their second ever game. A lot of young players. It's going to be very telling whether or not they can back up the level of effort and energy that they put into the first game, because there were a lot of players like going down with cramps towards the end, and the press dropped off a little bit. Gemma Lewis has spoken about how they put in a lot of work into the fitness side of things in preseason, but they also only had a shortened preseason because of the relocating to Australia and just getting the team up and running like later than other teams. Other teams were already into preseason when they're still trying to put their squad together. So she also said, like, yes, we put a lot of effort into fitness, but also we're not there yet. Like it's still a work in progress. I think some of their attacking structures were clearly a work in progress as well, but that's normal. Like that's the last thing that normally clicks for a team. So I expect to see that sort of grow naturally over the first month or so of the season, hopefully. Hopefully we do get that. Like hopefully we get nice, solid, noticeable progressions from game to game to game. It's definitely that potential because of the way they're sort of, just the way they're coming together, new squad and all this. So like I'm talking about this team's chances against Newcastle a lot more because I think it's very much like if you've never won a game before, you can't come out just like start guarantee games. But I do think it's a game that can be nice and competitive in a similar way they were against Western Sydney, which was a nice matchup for them. I think Newcastle will be a relatively decent matchup in a similar way. I think they did just who did the might have been like Emily Van Egmond or something like that. They just signed on loan or something for at least a short term, which is not ideal. You don't really want if they're having to come up against an Australian international. That does push the things a little more in Newcastle's favor. But like I have high hopes for this Phoenix team after seeing how they went in the first game. And this is like, speaking in context here, because a lot of people were probably predicting them to not win a game this season. I think they can chip away one or two the way they're going. And they're certainly going to be a difficult team for most teams to play. But yeah, the reason I'm focusing on the women more and not the men here, because I think the men are clear favorites against Newcastle in their game. I would expect them to win. I'll be disappointed if they don't win. I think that's a much better matchup for them. The little bit of confidence from getting some of the wider squad members out there. Ben Wayne got a goal in that FFA Cup game midweek that I'm talking about. It's a good way to bounce back a couple of days as well later after that disappointing 2-0 loss to Western Sydney last week. So bounce back swiftly in the FFA Cup despite playing a younger team, a more inexperienced team, getting some guys important minutes. So Luca Perso as well, club debut, things like that. Matthew Bozanovsky getting some good minutes, backup centre back. So that like those things, like Louis Fenton as well, set up the goal, beautiful cross. I love seeing that kind of thing from Louis Fenton. So that kind of thing, I think, bodes nicely for them to, get the train back on the tracks. No Ben Wayne pun intended there. So I think the men's team are clear favourites to win that game. It is an away doubleheader. This is a Newcastle Jets home games both times. I think the women's team they're going to have to show a little bit more in attack than they did in that first game if that's going to be the case. But as I say, they're a team I expect to grow significantly over the first few games in particular as they settle into things. So as long as they can match that consistency week in, week out, and then add a few things to the mix, I think they'll be a dangerous team to play against. Hopefully they can get a first win this week. I wouldn't bet on that. I certainly would if I were a betting person. Chuck something on the Phoenix men to get that win though.
Your pun was in reference to the Wayne train.
The Wayne train, yes.
Right, yeah, gotcha. 2 more questions. You recently highlighted Alex Rufer and his role with the Wellington Phoenix. And to me, that signals that you find Alex Rufer an interesting player within the Wellington Phoenix. So I have 2 questions stemming off that. You've seen one game of the women and you wrote about the squad ahead of the season. So you've got decent knowledge of all the players, their backgrounds, and then what they did in the first game. Is there an early contender for a similar angle? Not the specific Alex Rufer angle, but the individual where you find a wider story around them interesting. Like you don't have to give the full story right now, just like who's that player to watch out for with the Wellington Phoenix woman?
Yeah, I mean, it's borderline every single player in the squad is a really interesting story. It's interesting group like that. but I'll keep it to like the on the field minutes 1 to 90 type scenario. I think the Alex Rufer role in that team is being done by Isabel Gomez, who's I think 19-year-old Australian, listed as a defender at first as when she was first signed, but has been played that first game as a defensive midfielder. Someone who is strong in the challenge, like is not going to back away, probably pick up a few yellow cards, very similar areas to Alex Rufer there. It's just like a enforcer at the base of midfield. But I also think there's an interesting case to be made for Grace Wisniewski, who is the other central midfielder, someone who's probably played a lot more further forward. Certainly is like someone who's capable of playing centre mid, but has also played a lot more as a like in the further attacking lines. But she played next to Gomez in midfield, but almost with a kind of Rhea Percival-esque kind of role, where it was like you're a centre midfielder, but if they're deep midfielder, they're deep lying sort of player coming in, dropping in to collect the ball from the defense, if she goes, you go with her. Like you take. There wasn't only Wisniewski doing that. Also, one of the strikers would drop off and try to close down that passing angle as well, force them wide, and then you can sort of press a little bit more or try, bring your fullbacks into the mix. Saskia Vosper must have made about 6 or 7 interceptions throughout that game, just stepping up and reading the play. But yeah, Grace Wisniewski doing that is super interesting because she's a probably a player who's better known for, I'd say at this point in her career, the thing she's most known for is scoring the fastest ever goal at an under-17 World Cup. It's about 11 seconds into the third place game against Canada, I think it was. So like maybe a bit more known for her attacking instincts, and here you had her playing as someone more of a proper central midfielder, trying to read the play and win the ball and things, and just getting stuck in. And obviously has good quality on the ball as well. So when she gets it, she can pick a pass around. Some of their passing was a bit, that's one other aspect that needs to improve quite a lot, is just like hitting the pass. Don't not a meter behind your player, but like in their stride kind of things. Some of that was sloppy, working hard to win the ball and then giving away a bit too cheaply. But again, that's like first game kind of worries. So I would say, and it actually is in keeping with the Alex Rufer thing, isn't it? By picking 2 central midfielders, but Isabel Gomez for that specific Rufer role, and then for that more sort of metaphorical sense of the question, I'll go with Grace Wisniewski.
For the men, it's a good thing that we're just coming off that FFA Cup game where, as you said, a wider group of players were used. Is there someone from that, maybe from that younger group, who you're, again, following on from highlighting an interesting player within the group, maybe based off that FFA Cup, FF Up game? Is there a player like in that younger, wider Wellington Phoenix group that you're like, okay, now I need to really watch closely when they do get an opportunity because I see something there?
Yeah, and you could have asked this question a week ago and it would have been the same answer as well. It's Ben Old, who got a nice little run off the bench in the first or second game, I forget which one, but played 90 minutes in their most recent game. There was, one or two, I think Soterio didn't play that game, and Ben Wayne was on the bench. So in comes Ben Old. And then he also got a good stint in the FFA Cup game as well. So like, he's a dude who was on his first professional contract, was signed on pro terms, having only played 1 game off the bench for about 10 minutes or something last season, made his debut in that homecoming game when they finally came back and got to play in front of a big crowd and would have been in Wellington. So like he's been on this trajectory. He was along with Alex Paulson, who's now the reserve goalkeeper, who was signed on pro terms in the same time as Ben Old. Like those two were the stars of the academy team in the Premiership, as it was known then last season. Paulson just making save after save after save, incredible stuff. And Ben Old, in what was his second full season in the National League, but he made when I first saw him play in the season before that, first saw him play consistently, he obviously had some mad skills. Like he could go around players. He was like good touch, all those kind of things. But he was a little bit, you know, he was probably 16 at the time. He was a bit too weedy, maybe. Could get pushed around a lot. He came back the next year, and he was not weedy. Like he was not getting pushed around. He is like just I don't know what it is, because he doesn't look like a dude who's just Gary Hooper size or whatever. He's like, I don't know, he's just got a great sense of balance and like body control. The thing you saw from him so much in those National League games where he was so good is his ability he can hold off a challenge now. So he drops in from a playmaking position or attacking midfielder role or whatever, drops in maybe on like halfway or something, collects the ball. Guy rushes up to try challenge him. He holds him off. Then he turns him. Then because he's so quick and skillful, just boom, off you go. Either with a pass or just dribbling into space more often than not. And what's crazy is in the last 2 games that he's played, like started for the Phoenix and got good minutes, that's held up. You know, that he's playing at a higher level and that's held up. He's still holding guys off, turning, attacking that space and behind the midfield. Good direct stuff. Like that's cool. Plus, obviously, he's working hard off the ball, doing the things that Talai's asking him to do in order to maintain his role there. Like if you're not doing the defensive stuff, you don't get in games. Like you got to be able to do that as a minimum. So he's doing all that. It's cool. He's working hard. He's pressing. He's doing what is being asked of him. And also the thing that was so successful for him at National League level as translating towards A-League and that FFA Cup game as well. Like that's pretty good, because I guess the best thing you can say about him in these couple of games is he has, like, for a guy very early in his professional career, has not looked out of place. Like you would not knowing anything about the team, you would not pick that was his first A-League start against Western Sydney. He was one of the Phoenix's best players in an otherwise disappointing result. Like that's kind of nuts. To be able to say that about a young dude in his first A-League start, I don't know that you can understate that too much. So Ben Old is for sure someone who, if he's playing, like keep an eye out on what he's up to.
In theory, some of those young players might start to become the late game subs after those, as they get more opportunities in those cup games, which is like the general recipe for football around the world, is like you give everyone a crack in the cup games and kind of integrate them throughout the season based off that cup game experience. Like that seems like a tradition in football for player development. Rightio, National League, this might as well just be your neck of the woods. Just like whatever you want to highlight, throw up to finish the podcast. Decent 5 to 10 minutes. National League's always weird. South Central Series, it's always got some weird shit happening. And football's to be played as well. So wherever you want to take it, take us. So just take us on a journey through the National League, a bit of an odyssey. Consider me Odysseus, and I'm here to go through the National League South Central Series podcast closer with yourself.
Yeah, I've got I'll do my teams of the year in due course. Next week, I suppose, after things have wrapped up. So, like, as far as the looking back aspect goes, that will come in due, like that will happen soon enough. Don't worry about that. I think this right now opportunity is really, like, I would be doing a disservice to the mighty South Central League if I didn't just spend this time on highlighting the final weekend of the 2021 season, and just what an absolute cracker it's set up to be. I did talk about this a bit in the variety show as well, so I'm repeating myself a little bit. But like the Canterbury Pride lost their first 2 games. They looked like they were in a little bit of trouble. Came back out beautifully, responded with a couple 5-0 wins over Central, and then against Capital, who had beaten them earlier on. Capital and Southern both were the teams who beat Canterbury at the start. And then they traded wins against each other. So Southern beat Capital in the third round, gave themselves, basically it meant if Southern won out from that point, they win the South Central series, but they lost to Capital in the rematch the next week. So that balanced things back out again. But now Canterbury had this game against Capital last week. They're 2-1 down, I think, with about 15 minutes to go. Their keeper makes a brilliant save to deny Kaylee Ward, who was one-on-one looking for a hat trick. Would have killed the game off most likely, certainly as far as the Pride are concerned, because the draw wasn't good enough for them. They needed a win. Una Foyle makes that save, outstretched leg, brilliant. GIF of it in the week, what was it, week 5 write-up. So there's that. So people want to see it. Makes that incredible save. Canterbury 10 minutes later do manage to find an equalizer, bit of a convenient one where a cross was deflected off a defensive header that like looped up onto the crossbar and then fell nicely into the middle of the goal where Anneli Longo was following up and tapped that one in. So that makes it 2-2 with about 5 minutes to go into stoppage time, and Chiara Bocelli for Canterbury, 16 years old, scores just an insane direct free kick, edge of the box, curls it top corner to give Canterbury the win. So they come from behind to win 3-2, which then puts them in a position where if they beat Southern in the final round this week, they will probably, but not necessarily, win the South Central series, despite having lost those first 2 games. The not necessarily comes because Capital can still overtake them on goal difference if they beat Central by 4 goals more than what Canterbury win by against Southern. So if Canterbury get like a 3-0 win, it's pretty much over. But as I said, Canterbury beat Central 5-0 both times they played them. So Capital have goals in them too. Capital might be able to do that. They play on the Sunday as well, so they'll know exactly, like the first game's on Saturday, second game's on Sunday, so they'll know exactly what they need to do. So that's a feisty finish that could be coming up. Alternatively, if Southern win or even draw against Canterbury, then they win the South Central series, which would be massive for Southern football because, you know, they've really like struck on a nice little pattern for themselves in the last couple of years, really becoming a more competitive team than they had been. It's pretty big from them. Consistent players throughout the last couple of seasons as well. They've been real good. So it would be lovely to see them do that. It would also be crazy to see the Canterbury or Capital win the thing because of just the storylines behind that. And they were the 2 finalists last year. So that's mental. And then you chuck in the men's final, which is a final. There's no final in the women's one, but there's a final in the men's one. So the men's comp has Miramar Rangers versus Wellington Olympic. These 2 teams slugged it out all season during winter for the Central League title. Wellington Olympic ended up securing that one. A couple games to go, they beat Miramar 1-0. Kaylin Gould scored the only goal, I believe, in that game. Was about from memory, about 15 minutes to go in that one. He scores the winner. That Wellington Olympic win 1-0. Go on to that was actually the game that secured them the Central League title, beating their closest rivals there. So then when they played in the South Central Series prelims earlier, it was a 4-4 draw in which there was about I think there was 5 goals in the last 2 minutes plus stoppage time or something like that. There was a 95th minute penalty from Ben Mata was the final to equalize for Wellington Olympic was the final goal in that one. 4-4 absolute thriller. Ollie White got a hat trick in that game. A low-key thing to keep an eye on actually is the fact that Ollie White has 5 goals for the South Central Series. Kaylin Gould has 5 goals in the South Central Series. Lewis Toomey has 5 goals in the South Central Series, but he's a Wellington Phoenix player, so he's not obviously in the final where he gets another opportunity. So whoever scores more out of those 2 is going to, out of Gould and White, is also going to get the Golden Boot. Let alone the fact that these 2 teams who have a habit of playing, who are like close rivals, who have a habit of playing absolute thriller games between each other, they're going head-to-head for the South Central Series title as well. And just to add a little bit of extra fizz, who won the last ever NZ Premiership? Team Wellington. What happened to all those Team Wellington players when that club stopped to, cease to exist? Well, half of them went to Wellington Olympic, half of them went to Miramar Rangers. So there you go. It's the Team Welly derby. So just layer on top of layer on top of layer on top of layer as to why this last weekend of South Central Series National League football is going to be fantastic.
See, when I threw it to you, I was meaning this weekend is the Odyssey. And you Like nothing about the
Oh,
Odyssey of
the whole season's
yeah,
been
the
the
whole I can
Odyssey.
understand. Yeah, like that's commonplace. Like the season is many of these seasons are beautiful odysseys and sports fandom. Thing about the National League is a weekend like this, the weekend itself is an odyssey as you just laid out. But I can't remember anything about um the book was called The Odyssey, right? Featuring
The
Odysseus.
yeah,
Yeah.
I technically it's like an epic poem.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's been translated into book form. But yeah, old
So
mate Homer,
Homer,
old mate
I
Homer wrote
can't
that one.
I did study in high school. I can't remember
Same.
anything about it, but maybe you can remember something about it. So maybe
Yeah, I've
there
read it
is
since.
um you took me through the Odyssey. I feel very excited. Like that purpose served. Like you whipped me into a frenzy of intrigue and excitement around a funky weekend of South Central League football. Is there what's the equivalent of that in the Odyssey?
Um,
Like is there like Odysseus meets some god who like obviously not a let's stay away from the female, maybe a sexual encounter, god to god love making. I don't want that. Maybe he meets a
it
male,
was some of that, but
yeah,
yeah.
a male equivalent, and he like talks himself up or like spins a yarn, chews his ear off, and just leaves them intrigued and excitable.
Well, the Odyssey is a strange book in that it's not like it's not a Hollywood tale where there's this like a standard good guy and bad things happen to him, but they overcome it. Like Odysseus does some dumb stuff that puts himself in problems. Like there's the Cyclops scene where he like comes up with this ingenious plan to save all his men, get away from the Cyclops' lair. But then as he's going away, he's too like prideful and he has to yell back, "It was me, Odysseus. I did it. I outsmarted you, you bastard." Um, and so the Cyclops was like the son of Poseidon, and next thing you know, his ship gets wrecked by the sea because the god of the sea is coming for vengeance. Things like that, like. But yeah, I don't know. There's this encounter, and it's just like he bounces from crazy scenario to crazy scenario. I think probably because it's the last week of the season, we got to go with the very end of that book, where he finally gets back like 18 years later after he'd gone for the Trojan War and then fought all that. Finally gets back home. His son's fully grown now. His wife has been like faithfully holding out, but she's got like a billion, they call them suitors in the book, just a billion other men who are like, well, you're rich and famous, why don't you marry me? He's obviously dead or he would have come back by now. So he turns up and in disguise, and then there's just all these suitors outside his door hanging out, and they're wanting after his riches and his household and everything, his wife most of all. And he just like he's trying to remember how it goes, but I think he sort of like sneakily meets up with his son, and then they like probably a couple of like loyal household servants as well, and then they just like orchestrate a massacre, and he just kills everyone that's been hanging out at his house in order to like reclaim his household again. It's just an absolute massacre. So I'm going with that. I think the big finale, where just like the triumphant return home and then just bloodshed everywhere. I'm expecting something like that from these last three games. Just metaphorical bloodshed, of course, but you know how it goes.
Yeah, but in the example, like I'm the sun for maybe. I'm definitely not Cyclops based on what the Odyssey that you took us on with the National League yarn, but I'm the sun.
Okay, so Odysseus is the National League. You're the son who's been waiting for the National League to come back all this time.
No. It's purely based. This is now we're getting weird because it's purely based on what you said. What you said was the Odyssey, and it left me feeling like Odysseus's son when his dad returns, and he's just full of excitement. He's ready to fucking kill these suitors. He's ready to go. He's had the pep talk, like greatest day of his life. That's how I feel based on what you said. But
okay. We're going layers here where you're the story is the Odyssey, but then you're also in the story. So, okay, yeah, all right.
We're always in the story, and we're always in the Odyssey. Every day is an Odyssey. You are Odysseus, or maybe, like me, right now you feel like Odysseus' son, and that's okay.
Telemachus.
It's also Telemachus.
Yeah,
and it's also good if you're one of Odysseus's loyal servants and you held it down at the whare with the wife, with the son, and then you just hold it down. Odysseus comes back swords drawn, fuck everyone up with myself, Odysseus' son, kia kaha, stay beautiful. Enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the hot temperatures, make sure you get outside. Hopefully you're listening to us on your favorite podcasting app service outside. Like definitely get outside and listen to a bit of Niche Cast as well, because it's a glorious thing. Summertime in Aotearoa. Stay beautiful. Chirp.